anyone else who wants to join us can just show up eventually. Um, yeah, yeah. So I'd read them 4 times. Still can't remember anything. So when things fall apart by Pema Chodron. We did a blitzkrieg through chapters 13 through 15. I think I smushed a chapter in to try to move along, and then I regretted that because it was a lot. um, Based on what I'm looking at purely by highlight information, because like I said, I read these weeks ago, and now I'm at a blank of exactly what I got out of it. I wish I'd written down some notes. That's kind of what I wish I had done. um, we are jumping into a bit of what it means to be a bodhisattva and what that looks like. Once again, she talks a bit about Trungpa Rinpoche and his approach to his students, which is always interesting to me. Um, oh, yes. Okay, so this blue part. I really liked this blue part that I highlighted. It says, if today the instruction is to put everything on the right, one does that as impeccably as one can. When tomorrow the instruction is to put everything on the left, one does that with one's whole heart. This one is really applicable to me as I think about what's brought me peace as a worker in our very work-based society. um, Frequently, I think you can get overwhelmed with I suppose, the never-ending just you gotta do this things to make money, to eat, to sleep, and then to make money, and eat, sleep, spend money, you know what I mean? You get caught up in that whole never-ending cycle, and so when I focus down on just doing the best, doing my job well, um, no matter what that job is in the moment, it's helped a lot with not feeling terribly overwhelmed or burnt out about it. That's not always an easy mindset to get to, but I've certainly found it really having that practice in my day-to-day life. Oh, it helps a ton when I can do it. Especially as a teacher right now where things are kind of weird in education land. I don't know how aware of education land you guys are, but in
Not
education
very
land,
much.
it's bad.
Yeah. This is the general impression I've had, but as far as detailed specifics,
There are a
very
lot of things not
convoluted.
going well for education land workers. Uh, and even at my own school, my district, there's been so much shuffling and change that I have an incredibly large number of coworkers who are just absolutely disgruntled. They are mad at life, the system. You would think my principal was the worst person to step into the building. Let me tell you, she is the nicest principal I've literally ever worked for. I also, she's the only one I've worked for in this district, right? Because this is my first year in this district. So for me, while other people are like, I liked the other principal better, I'm like, she's just the only principal I've had.
Max,
Well,
do you realize you've been muted?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
I haven't heard a thing if you've been talking, Max. Did you want to say something, Max?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't want to talk over people if they have things to say.
It's fine.
Oh, okay.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
you
you
had
had
said
said
something
something
earlier,
earlier,
though,
though.
that didn't come through.
I left.
Oh,
You
okay.
laughed?
Yes.
Oh, good. That's because I'm hilarious. Um, yeah, so I don't know, what do you guys think about this practice of just, I don't know if this is the best way to word it, but just whatever you've got to do, even if it's different from what you had to do before or doesn't always make sense, you just do the best you can. How do y'all feel about that?
Okay, so I have two minds on this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this is absolutely the way to go if, in fact, that's the thing you have to do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you are wasting time.
Well, I mean, a lot of this section was about letting
Fair.
go of rigidity and like there's like one right way to do things.
Mhm.
That whole idea. So
Well, that's exactly my point. If this is what you have to do, well, then yes, you have to do it. But if it's
Yeah.
not what you have to do, if it's something that you could do, I mean, yes, do it well, sure. But like putting things on the left and the next day on the right, or whatever the order was, um, is nonsensical. And they're
Mhm.
using that as the example of like, here's how you deal with the bullshit of life. But I like to think about what I'm doing.
Mhm.
I like to make sure that what I'm doing actually is meaningful.
Yeah.
So if I hear, okay, we're putting it on the right today and we're putting it on the left tomorrow, I don't know why we're just doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put it on the left or the right today and the left tomorrow. I'll put it on
Mhm.
the left tomorrow and leave it where it is today.
Until I am told why it must move.
Yeah, yeah.
I think.
Because
Yeah.
there are so many people out there that want me to do things that mean nothing, and then I do them and they say, oh no, wait, do it this other way. And if I had had 2 seconds to talk to them about why they're wanting to do it, wouldn't have to do it the first way.
Mhm. Yeah, I think
So when
that you have
things,
a fair caveat right there for sure.
right, things like this, I very much understand. Like if the garbage is full, take out the trash. You know, it's that simple.
Mhm.
But like if you've got someone else telling you what to do, rather than recognizing a thing must be done, well, now you have to trust that the other person knows what's up. And
Mhm.
that's not always the case.
No, it's not.
That's where I think this kind of breaks down for me. But like the general intention of when you do things, do them well, and if it's different from how it was before, don't get hung up on the fact that it's different.
Yeah.
I get that. I get that, and I also recognize that I'm sort of sitting contrary to the whole thing with my example. I'm not there yet. I just yeah. I feel like it's a good generalized lesson. You know, it makes sense, but there are some areas where that might not be the best idea.
And maybe some context is
Absolutely.
missed here
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
because the earlier that's not showing on this page, but
Mhm.
the beginning part of this anecdote was that they learn some ritual to do it a particular way, and then some people start to like nitpick and tell other people that they're failing to do it the correct way. So then he would switch the correct way to something else. So then everybody's got to learn again to do it this other way, and eventually learning that it is sort of arbitrary and that none of those little details are what actually mattered.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yeah.
it like so the lesson is the thing that you're saying, I guess, but it is kind
Interesting.
of weird the way that she's actually this is kind of a problem I felt with the
Mhm.
major or at least all of this chapter that I did get through was that she does this a lot where she's like having something that sort of seems loosely tied to what she concludes at the end of it, and the point is good, but then also it's kind of like multiple things are happening and something's getting
Mm.
lost. So the way
Mhm.
that it sounds here at the conclusion of, oh, there's no one right way and you should put your heart into doing whatever the way that you've been told, whatever it is you're doing, just do it with your whole heart. Okay, but
Mhm.
that's not really, that doesn't seem to be what was supposed to be taught by this instruction that he was putting forth to all of those students. So I don't know.
Interesting.
I'm like,
Also, how exhausting. You know, how demotivating. Like I'm out here giving my all, and then you're like, oh, that doesn't matter. Do it this way, and then you're like, okay, I'll do that, and then it's again meaningless. And it's just like,
so
well,
Meaningless.
the example used to me didn't have like a whole lot of practical bearing on day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So I kind of interpreted it more as like, like learning to draw a flower versus like learning that like any way you draw a flower can be beautiful. Like there's no right way to like color in like or like paint something. I don't know. That felt more practical to me of like because people can get very particular and judgy about like, no, this is the right like way to draw this form. This is like, the right way to use color and whatever.
Right.
And so it was more about like that adaptability. But yeah, I
Mhm.
do think there is a dissonance between like the conclusion drawn and the example given, where if you miss that context or like don't follow her line of thinking all the way
Mhm.
through, it's almost contradictory. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those are all great points. Thank you. Ugh. It's interesting how much different the takes can be because like for me it was just applicable in the moment because of what's been going on at work. But I think you guys have some really great opposing takeaways and thank you for pointing them
It's
out.
exactly because of work that I have this perspective.
You and I work in very different fields, Max.
Oh, we do. We sure do.
We could swap these sometime. You just come up here and you can well down here I guess geographically. And you teach the kiddos.
Nope. No,
It's
I'm
an art
good.
class. I bet you
No,
can wing it.
Nope. I'm good.
No, it's a great idea.
You can put speakers up onto brick walls.
I might be able to do it. I don't know how long they'll stay there once they're there, but I could probably get them up
That is an
initially.
important part of the equation.
Yeah. Just get a whole bunch of tape. It's fine.
They'll get up there initially. I don't know what happens after.
Right. Once I leave, it's your problem.
um. This was a interesting. Not this whole quote actually. I really focused in on this second sentence of it. Is when we feel inadequate and unworthy, we hoard things. Um. And
Oh, that resonated with me very hard. Yeah.
yeah. We whether it can be material or spiritual or emotional. We just hoard things, right? Because you're like, I'm scared. Clothe myself in things.
Right.
I do this. I know a lot of people who do this. And I know
hmm
people who suffer great consequences from doing this too much.
I feel particularly blessed to have not had this issue.
I'm so happy for you.
I'm also happy for me because I've seen people that have this issue and it's like, oh no. Oh no.
Oh no. Well, and I have an unfortunate like times in my memory of like I wish that we could have just thrown those things away. Because
Mm-hmm.
growing, yes. Anyway, I won't go into the details. It's just another factor of Dessa's amazing childhood.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about some stuff. Let's see, Bodhisattva.
Dharma, yada yada.
Da-da-da. What we do on the outer level has the power to loosen up deep-rooted patterns of holding on to ourselves. Let's see. Before that it was about giving food to people, which feels good. I agree. I like feeding people. It's like knowing people have the food they need. That's a deep thing for me.
It was also quite a bit about like giving people like the benefit of the doubt or like the room to change and make their own
Yeah.
choices and stuff.
Oh, this one was funny. About the third day of the program, we were all sitting there meditating when one woman suddenly stood up, stretched a bit, and lay down on the floor. When I asked her about it later, she said, "Well, I felt so tired that I thought I'd be kind to myself and give myself a break. It was then I realized I needed to talk about the magic of discipline and not being swayed by moods." Did you guys have any thoughts on that particular anecdote?
I am this woman.
Yeah.
I am the woman who got up and laid down on the
And
floor.
I do indeed need more discipline in my day-to-day life.
I am the woman who gets up and lays on the floor.
I don't know
um,
that this is that useful. I mean, I get that this is what prompted her to have this thought that then encouraged something that was more like useful, but it's sort of out of context, I think. There's no Like, we have no idea about how that woman lived up until that point, you know? You don't.
Does
This
feel like a
might be
little
like a.
uncharitable. Like, yeah. Like,
What if she's the person who's always suffering and made miserable and put herself through a lot for no good reason, and now she's like, you know what? Sometimes if I'm not feeling good, I should
I
help
should
take
take
care of
care
my
of
body because I
myself.
never take
Yeah.
care of my body, and now the
Yeah.
one time that she did was at just a slightly inappropriate time in a way that wasn't palatable to the, like, and I don't think that's a good place to do this, because when you're in a meditation hall where now everybody's doing the same thing, and that can be really distracting or
Mhm.
off-putting for people, and maybe that's temptation for them that they shouldn't have in this environment and things like that. But it's just, I also felt it was kind of an inappropriate thing to say in this context in the chapter too. It was not, like, we don't actually know that this is an issue of discipline, and actually there might be some amount of her having to overcome a feeling that she's had, that she puts herself through suffering that she didn't need to, and this is the one time where she finally was like, I'm going to be kind to myself because I've been really bad to myself.
Yeah, I think
And
that's a really good point.
I felt very
Yeah.
much like that was the first thing I thought was, how do you even know? This seems like kind of weirdly judgmental for,
I think
even though it's
once
not really
again we are
directly
the woman who
judgmental.
got up and laid on the floor in this case. Of like,
Yeah, in an indirect way, right? Like, okay, would I do that? Probably not. But I've definitely struggled with, like, sacrificing my own health and comfort for other things that were going on in an unnecessary way, or like to a destructive way, like to a degree that was destructive to myself, that I then had trouble recovering from, that shouldn't have happened. And had I sometimes just done something like this, it could have saved me like an entire week of recovering from something, when I if I just gave myself the break that I needed. And that sometimes, I
yeah.
mean, there's a lot of people, especially people with kids, who just don't give themselves that space. And, like, how do we know? How does she know if that was actually the best decision for that woman? I mean, maybe she should have excused herself from the meditation hall and done that somewhere else, but you really, how can you know that this is a failure of her discipline and not actually like an active
Active choice of
choice
like,
that she's
hey,
making, that's like strides in her own personal journey, that she's been extreme in a different kind of way. And yeah, it's still kind of inappropriate. Maybe she should have done it in a different way, but is it for the reason that she's saying here?
mhm.
Don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, we had in the other book too, where she was talking about, oh, maybe we should, instead of turning up the heat, we should just become like, learn to be a little uncomfortable sometimes and like put up with stuff. But that's depending who you're talking to, you know?
Mhm.
Sometimes it's excessive, and we're all coming from a different perspective. And I don't know if maybe she's speaking from her own past, like before she was ordained, the kind of mentalities that she had personally, and so
Mhm.
she's speaking to like that former layperson kind of mindset that was just in her own experience, or if the people that she typically encounters, that just isn't the same as, like, not everybody is like that. And
Mhm.
I don't know, but I didn't like this part. And I didn't think that it was fair.
Yeah, I think that's
And the
very
next part
interesting.
too. Like, she kind of gets it. She's talking about these other things in the following paragraph of inappropriate behavior when you're in a hall with many other people who are trying to all perform a certain type of meditation. I mean, the
Mhm.
other part being, there's no reason by that laying down, like lying down on the floor, doesn't mean you aren't meditating.
Yeah.
You can meditate while lying down on the floor. You
Yes.
can meditate while doing anything, but I mean, maybe she wasn't. But still.
I frequently meditate while lying down.
I frequently don't have time to lie down or meditate separately and must do them together as well.
You can meditate while you wash the dishes. Like,
Oh
this
yeah.
is also somewhat hypocritical seeming, actually, that she previously a few pages back is going on about there's no one right way to do things,
Yeah.
and that you need to be flexible, and that you should embrace like that everybody has their own way and they can do it the right way without doing it the one way. And then here, when it comes to sitting meditation, saying there's like a right way, and all the people, I mean, it does sound like some of these people weren't doing it correctly, but also, I mean, somebody who gets up and starts crying and runs out of the room is still doing the work if they keep coming back and meditating some more. It's just like really hard for them at that point. And in the future, presumably, they won't be in that position anymore, and they'll be able to sit through it and not have to run out of the room crying. But like that, whatever this happened in their life that they're reflecting on in this moment and the feelings coming up, there's nothing wrong with that. And this is not the correct way.
Mhm.
This is not the correct way. This is the one incorrect way to talk about meditation, I think. It's not that
Mhm.
everyone has to sit and do it. And yeah, in this tradition, maybe that's how they do it. But that doesn't mean there's only one way to meditate. And it doesn't mean that these students are doing a bad job.
Mhm.
And that was really frustrating. Like, how. I mean, also, this was written in the 90s, so maybe she's like different perspective by now, but seemed kind of hypocritical or like contrary to what we just read a few pages prior.
Yeah. I agree. Interesting. Interesting. Let's see what else pops out in chapter 16.
We didn't get Des's view on that quote, though.
I think you guys had some really good views. I was of two minds when I originally read it. On the one hand, I think there are moments where I need to say, you know what? I need to be practicing self discipline right now because this is the time to stretch that muscle and, work it. But I think you have an absolutely valid point because I know that um, I do have a tendency to be that person who never gives myself a break as well and works myself until the point of exhaustion. And so taking a moment to realize, hey, what if I stop before I get to collapsing? I think you're absolutely right. So for me, I immediately had a lot of compassion for the woman who chose to lay on the floor as someone who might, in fact, choose to lay on the floor. Especially because my body is made of spare parts. And so I know that like the sitting meditation would probably become incredibly painful for me depending on how long it was going.
Yeah. For me, I also have a lot of like chronic pain and stuff like that. And there is like an almost incompatibility of needs here, and like I do need to cultivate discipline in some areas, whether it's like personal practice or like work
Mhm.
stuff, day-to-day life stuff. But at the same time, I do often need to be this woman that like lays on the floor and is
It's
kind
time
to
to lay down
themselves
now.
and like realizes, yes, I'm in pain. I need to like lay down, take a break.
My body needs
Um,
time to heal, and this is not healing.
And I think an important thing here that doesn't really get addressed very well in the chapter is that like the paramitas and this concept of like prana, like it's not ever just one of them at a time. Like they all interface together.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And I feel like that could have been addressed better through these examples and through all of this chapter. Because there is really a dissonance here between this section and the section that preceded it, because there is this judgment coming through of like, no, this is the right way to meditate. Everyone needs to be more disciplined. But we just got done saying, like, no, there's no right way.
Yeah. Um, she has an interesting example over here. You'd rather stay in the cozy bed, but you jump out and make the fire because the brightness of the day in front of you is bigger than staying in bed. And I'm like, oh man, I wish. What makes me jump out of
So
bed is the fact that
potential.
my son is still pulling my hair at 5:45 a.m. and I should probably get up and give him food so he'll stop. Um, as it turns out, really hard to reason with a 1-year-old, I found. Shockingly difficult. Um,
Why can't they understand logic?
so an interesting one I would be to kind of pivot away from the other part of the conversation. She calls meditation something that doesn't add to the equation, as a place where things come and go without further embellishment. Do you find that to be true in your practice?
Sometimes.
That's the goal.
Yeah, I think like being able to meditate and let everything kind of come and go without reactivity or latching onto anything is the goal, but it is not always the like effective result. Like it's not always what happens.
Yeah. I think also I get a little pedantic about the definition of some of the words in this sentence, and so then I begin to think that meditation does add to the equation, or at least begins to take away from it, perhaps, because it feels sometimes that the point of meditation for me ends up being to unravel things so that they're not deceivingly bigger than they are.
That's I find that happens as a background process, that it's not something to actively do.
Mm-hmm.
You just let it happen and the brain will do what it does and you watch that happen, but you don't
Mm.
participate in it.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
way easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but those sort of at least for me, things like epiphanies or getting a less biased and more broad perspective on something that's been troubling me
Mm-hmm.
never happens through direct thinking. It's only through letting go of the stuff that's in my way. And that can only happen by just sitting there and letting what comes come and returning to the focus, because while you're doing that, you are unimpeded. And the
Mm-hmm.
longer you can maintain that flow, um, the more quickly all of the other thoughts, anxieties, whatever, trend towards that flow and get out of the way, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I fully agree with that statement. It's just not, you gotta work at it to get there, and work is probably the wrong word. You gotta dedicate time to get there. And I'm not there right now for sure. Used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I try and meditate now, and it's just like, oh, okay, I can make 15 seconds of present mindful awareness, and then I'm thinking about sponges or something. Like,
Sponges are fascinating, though.
they really are. You see, that's all it takes.
You're allowed to you're allowed to have a thought about sponges. You just don't get attached to the thought about
Oh,
Well,
I'm
no,
very
see, because
attached to the thought
then
of
I forget
sponges.
where I am. I stop paying attention to my body and presence, and like I just sponges. That's all it is now.
I am sponges. Here I am.
Mm. It'd be comfy, I think.
Oh.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No bones, just some spines sometimes.
We're
Don't even
so
have to
on
move to
task.
eat. I
So
know.
good.
This is exactly the perfect analog for meditation for me.
I do like how she ends the chapter about how needed bodhisattvas are, and I'm like, yeah, that's at least a
Oh
solid
yeah.
thought.
Mm.
And shove bodhisattvas all over the place. That'd be great.
Yep.
17 is just called opinions.
Hmm.
Um, I've highlighted the quote that summarizes at least 3 pages for you, which is opinions are opinions, nothing more or less.
Okay. tautologies are like that.
I do think that it's really important to be a mindful person of like, all right, well, is this just an idea I have or is it actually reality? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, that stepping back and doing that constantly is so important just to be a good person, but especially like as a teacher, the number of times like I'll be talking to like my colleagues and realizing where we've let our ideas of the children get in the way of who the children are is really fascinating. Um, Also, the number of times I've been made aware of like a child's struggling home life, I'll be talking to the counselor and she'll tell me so and so is, they're homeless. They're living at like right now they live this place, but they travel this place. I'm like, wow. And just to realize sometimes that my perception of this reality of they're being a snot in my class versus well, they didn't sleep well last night because their bed is on the floor. It is the floor with a blanket, you know, and that's affecting their mood because they're not well rested. I know that's not quite where this quote is taking us with this page, but it's the context with which it applies most strongly in my life. And then I highlighted when we hold on to our opinions with aggression, no matter how valid our cause, we are simply adding more aggression to the planet, and violence and pain increase. And I think that's really interesting. As people whom I'm speaking with, who I believe have a strong sense of justice and doing things to make life better for everyone, um, I know my feelings of that can get kind of aggressive, weirdly. I can get very
This
strong feelings about it.
this section did frustrate me a little bit, like a few
Yeah.
lines ahead of that. Nothing will ever change through aggression. You
Mhm.
could not say that much changes through non-aggression either. However, non-aggression benefits the earth profoundly. Like, to an extent, I do very much agree, and like the less aggression present in the world, the better. But there was another line somewhere talking about like oppressors versus
Mhm.
whatever, and I'm like, I don't know that I agree that non-aggression is always an effective solution. Like, it very much sounded like
Mhm.
if you're in an oppressed situation, then you should, you know, not react to that with like aggression or personal like defense or whatever. And that frustrated me. And I don't know that that was what was being said, but this whole part just kind of occasionally I would agree, and then all of a sudden it's like my hair case would raise a little bit of like I don't know.
Fair. Absolutely fair. Yeah. Lee, do you have any thoughts?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Something was going on with my mic. Um, I think that at the heart of it, it's she kind of says, well, if both sides are being aggressive, then that's the opposite of peace. That's how you have
Mhm.
war. That's how you have. I mean, of course, somebody can do something bad to another, but also, if we're going back to maybe what isn't really stated here of suffering increases if you're responding in that way, right? Like no matter what's happening on the outside of you, if the inside in the inside you can have peace and you can see things and have understanding, and if you respond that way, then they can't, not that they can't do anything bad, but the suffering that it's causing to you personally is lessened. And if more people learn how to respond that way, like eventually there won't be any kind of aggression and violence, and suffering from that can't happen anymore. Maybe is like the broad sense. Whether or not the right thing to do is an aggressive action. And there's also, I think, a difference between aggression, like the feeling, like being
Yeah.
very deeply affected in a hostile kind of way, emotionally and taking action. Like, I don't think that, I mean, I'm not really sure what she thinks, I guess, on this, but there's a difference ultimately between non-action and non-aggression. And that it's possible to be in an oppressive situation where one side's being aggressive and to not respond back to them with aggression and amplify that aggression, and maybe even in some ways in their minds justifying what they're doing. You know, people who are fighting back against an oppressor, often that exact those actions that they take that are aggressive are justifying continued aggression toward them. And instead, if there were a different approach, I mean, you can take action without having it be necessarily categorized as like aggressive or having that same kind of hateful emotional response. And to see that we're not, you know, there's sort of a imagined sides in this, and that at the root of it we can understand the people and why they do the things that they do, even if they're wrong in doing them and they're doing something that's harmful to others, and we don't have to hate them for it. We don't have to see them through that light. And if we can get to the heart of it and understand them better, then maybe we can actually do something about it that's more effective and that lasts longer. I mean, not that we just sit around and don't do anything, but
Yeah.
maybe something like that is a useful way of putting it. To just, oh well, they're killing people. I guess I just sit here and just.
Oh well, sucks to
I...
suck.
I guess I'll just die.
I
No,
guess I'll
I don't.
just die.
I don't think that's the point here, as much as how you're letting things affect you, and then how that's changing your response to things, and what. I mean, also the way that anger kind of blinds people to the actual solutions. If you don't see the real cause and you can't find a real solution either, that we have to be able to be like calm and peaceful to really find ways that can address these problems. And of course, it's not going to, like, one person learning how to do this isn't going to change all of our like global society. But if we can get to a point where children learn how to do this, and you know, more people understand and know how to understand others, then maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big dreams.
Yeah, I mean, it does say later on, like, it's up to us to sort out what is opinion and what is fact. Then we can see intelligently. The more clearly we see, the more powerful our speech, and from there, presumably, like, our actions can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Um. She says, "Don't get swept away by the outrage, so you can see the suffering clearly."
It's a much better thing to say.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was trying to get to. If you're blinded by like the strong emotional response, and you're also putting, I mean, the winners and losers mentality too is against an actual solution. If we're so caught up in, oh, these people are wrong and they need to know they're wrong, and take that, they're going down in history as being wrong. It's like
suckers.
really toxic. And it's not actually productive, and it's not going to help when, like, ultimately what we want is not to be proven, or shouldn't be, to be, oh, we were right about this and you were wrong. And you know, they often say this about politicians or people on certain sides of social issues, like activism. They have that like really, really strong feelings about, oh, they're wrong and we're right. And when actually I mean, you could be wrong. Maybe some things people are doing are also wrong, but at the core of it is, well, you shouldn't be condemned or treated as second-class citizens because of it. Like, we should have the freedom to make whatever wrong choices if they're not hurting other people and such like that. If we can get to a point where, well, I don't agree with what you're doing, you don't agree with what I do, but can we both just live and not bother each other instead of having to say, well, these people aren't people, and oh, well, now you think that, so you're not people. Is it really helping? Is it fixing anything? And is it getting to an actual solution? It never has.
Yeah. Yes. Ah. Why did I try to move this right now? I looked over and something bothered me, and I was like, I'll just move that real quick, and then it was a bad idea. Okay. So, I think that it's interesting that she says once again to do everything as if it were the only thing in the world that mattered. Because it gets kind of back to what Max was saying of like, but why? Why am I doing this particular thing sometimes? That thing doesn't make sense.
Well, all the time knowing that it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah. I think it's good sometimes to do that. Like Max said, if you have to do the thing. Um, especially if you gotta do it anyway. Might as well do your best.
Right.
But, yeah. Does not always make sense to do that.
You know, it does kind of remind me of what we were reading in the previous book by Thich Nhat Hanh, like the in mindfulness, being in the moment and doing this activity. Well, he said, oh, if you're doing the dishes, imagine that your job is to do the dishes, so you do the dishes really well, and you live in this moment and just pay attention to the details of this thing. And ultimately, doing the dishes is a very small moment and isn't really that important of a thing, but you lived in that moment, and that's the only place you can be. And maybe in that wording, we kind of were like, okay, it makes a
Yeah.
little more sense in that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, it's once again, like, you gotta do the dishes. Like, otherwise your house gets filthy, right? So if you've gotta do that task anyway, do it well if you can.
Kind of. Some of the following sentences kind of sound like that's maybe the point.
It's just interesting. It does feel like the logic goes back and forth a lot in this chapter, though. Like, this, but actually this. So, that's a little weird. Wobbly. Any final thoughts now that we've reached the end of chapter 17?
No.
Cool.